So, Killers of the Flower Moon is the latest film from Martin Scorsese, based on the 1920s murders of the Osage tribe in Oklahoma. Now, this is like the type of film that I could totally see, Scorsese wanting to do because it's right within his wheelhouse. It has all the elements of like the crime pictures that he's done within, like Goodfellas and The Wolf of Wall Street. By probing deep down into these people who were, just compelled by corruption and grief and just did not find much of a way to get out of the hole that they have dug themselves. And in that regard, I actually kind of like Killers of the Flower Moon a little bit more than his other films, because this one doesn't give the character as much of an out from this situation, and it totally could. Like, there are several points where it could really give the character that point of like redemption for what he's done, but never gives him that satisfaction. And it's cold and cruel, and like I kind of wouldn't have it any other way with how it happens in the film. So it takes place within the Osage County, within this small town. And this town is like grown up with, with the Indian people there having grown rich from like their land, but also kind of, recognizing that they might have lost a bit of their culture by playing into like the capitalist system. So the film starts off with that angle. And I like the way that Scorsese both like begins and ends the picture with that level of insight into the tradition and the concerns of the people with, how they are going to progress further into the 20th century. So there's always like a firm focus of what film is trying to say, which is, wasn't a big concern because Scorsese usually does a pretty good job. He doesn't usually get lost in the weeds of what he's trying to make, and thankfully he doesn't here. So the primary story takes place, well, it starts in 1990, but it goes in the 1920s, is that Ernest, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, has just come home from World War I, and he's looking to, not quite settle down, but just try to, like, find any means of finding, money and women. And so he goes to his uncle's farm, or not farm, cattle ranch, basically. His uncle is he's referred to as King. His name's like William Hale, but everyone refers to him as King just because he kind of more or less owns the place around like this small town, but with how much political influence he weaves and how much he integrates himself with the tribe. He's played by Robert De Niro in definitely one of his best roles in the longest time. Like De Niro has like a great filmography, but in terms of his more recent roles, this is easily one of the best ones, because the whole deal with Willie is that he wants to try to find like the more or less kind of like the legal and the illegal ways of trying to swipe all the money and land that he can from the Osage tribe. So we realize that, since Ernest, since he pretty much just outright says like, I love money, I love being like a greedy POS, agrees like, hey, I'll do whatever you want, uncle. And his uncle's like, hey, what would be really it'd be really cool if you married into this one tribe where they have like this mother who's about to die and she has all these other sisters. If you were to marry one of them, we could inherit all their land if everyone else in the family gets knocked off. And the film establishes early that this is a very common thing that goes down in this town. Like, there are murders that are not investigated. They just keep happening, and just nobody bothers to figure out. Like, they usually rule it out as suicide, even though it's quite clear that these were all murders. So Ernest is like, oh, okay, I'll go along with it. So he ends up hooking up with Molly, played by Lily Gladstone, in what is easily the standout role here. And it's mostly just because Gladstone's character has the biggest transformation. Like, when you first see Molly, she's very, like, collected and assertive. When she hangs out around Ernest for the first time, you can tell that she's in control, the way she just kind of has like this little sly smirk and just is kind of like, I'm a little bit amused by you, but I'm not quite taken in by you. And she knows how to hold her ground in certain situations. So, like, she's taken to Ernest just because he has, like, a sweet charm and everything. And and to some degree, Ernest seems to form a little bit of a romance with her, but then it keeps going back to like, yes, it's pretty clear he's doing this for money. He's willing to go to the scummy lengths that he has to go to in order to acquire this family's wealth, which includes murder. Murder of members of the family, murders of detectives who come to investigate, basically murders of anyone who gets involved in any way, shape, or form. So the crime keeps receding, dead bodies keep racking up. There's explosions mounted in town. There's suicides that are not staged well, which leads to Ernest freaking out and Willie just kind of like just trying to calm him down, which I kind of like that dynamic there where it's like Willie is a little bit more intense and a bit terrified of like, being found out in this. And Willie, who is orchestrating all this, because he basically owns this town, has like barely any fear here. Like even when like, people who pretty much know what he's doing around town, like at one point he blows up someone's house and someone who knows it's just like, Willie, tone it down, will you? Just what is wrong with you? And it's just like there's like this very chilling effect with the character, just because like Robert De Niro, whenever he shows up around the Osage tribe, like he's trying to be friendly and nice, he's speaking their language, he's trying to like offer them insight and goods and looking out for their health, even though he's really not. Like, and it becomes clear at one point where like one of the other members of the tribe, he takes out life insurance on them, but he mentions that, he's depressed and suicidal and just like, and he can't get help. Like everyone's like, oh, just mental health, whatever, just drink it off. And even like Willie's like, it's fine, just drink it, because he's counting on him dying. And you can see like that look in his eyes where like it gets to a point where he'll just like outright say, yeah, I'm gonna murder them, like kind of half jokingly, in that manner that kind of like hits home today, where people are like, like the biggest thing that you can do to get people onto your side is just keep telling everybody it's a joke until it's not. And that's exactly how Willie operates here. Now, when I say like there's a lot of areas that I want to cover, but I think the one thing I want to cover most is Gladstone, just because she's the standout role here. She will probably get nominated for Best Actress. I hope they go for Best Actress. I hope they don't go for Best Supporting Actress, because she really is a powerhouse here, just because her character goes from, like I said, she goes from being assertive to, and then you see like the parallels in like the second act of the film where she grows sick, she grows distrustworthy of everybody and everything around her. She grows paranoid about all the murders. She starts experiencing visions of death, which relate to her from her mother. Is basically like, when you're close to death's door, you start seeing like owls, and just like the way that she turns into this mess by the end, that you really feel bad for her. But here's the thing, like you feel bad for her, but you don't feel like Ernest is going to be able to like pull himself out of the depths, because like I said, this is a story where it could be framed as like, if this was really like a tacky film, they could have staged it so like Ernest, tried to redeem himself, which he does try to do in the final act of the film by kind of coming forward about all these crimes. But at the same time, it's like, this is a guy who can't help himself. Like right up to like at one point, like there's one of my favorite scenes in the film is when he's intentionally poisoning his wife. And she's sitting there in her bed, like just kind of just freaking out, like growing distrustworthy. She can barely function. And Ernest just sits there with the cattle ranch right outside, just on fire for his uncle trying to have an insurance scheme going. And Ernest just looks at this hell that he's created and just kind of like stews in it. Like he gives himself like some of the weakening chemical agent that he's been giving his wife to himself, because this is the hell that he's made for himself. And even when he's given the chance to redeem himself by admitting to all the crimes, he still doesn't do it, because he's, this is the life that he's compelled to lead, where, he just can't help himself. And it comes right up to that point. Like it gets to the point where he admits to everything, and all he has to do to fully redeem himself is admit to one last thing in front of Molly. And he can't do it. And it's such the perfect closure to this story to ensure that, even when he was trying to redeem himself, he was still a scummy guy for everything he did and everything he orchestrated, that he doesn't deserve much redemption by the end. And it's redemption doesn't so much come through, it doesn't really come through the law. It more or less comes from, like, how he's morally perceived here, which is just scummy. And that's the way you kind of want it, because, like, this is a guy who does scummy deals, and he plays the same game as Willie. He deceives people, he integrates himself well, and is just conning people out of money and land. And you just, much like Scorsese's other films, you just want to see these people go down and watch what happens when the other foot drops. And it does become, like, cathartically satisfying as it goes throughout the film. Now, I mentioned that there's a fairly big cast here, but, like, they're used somewhat sparingly here. Like, some people have probably seen the trailers and note that, like, Jesse Plemons shows up as an FBI agent. I'll be honest here, like, pretty much all the bigger names in the cast list don't show up until the final act of the film. So Jesse Plemons as an FBI agent, Brendan Fraser as Willie's attorney, John Lithgow as the prosecuting attorney. Just there's a few big names that just kind of, like, pop up. Even, like, Martin Scorsese's big cameo is saved for the end, which, without spoiling it, I think it's probably one of the best cameos he's had in any of his films. Just for, like, it's easy to say, like, it's the best, just because it's one of the more direct addressments that he's ever done in one of his films. And I feel like it's very much warranted here. Like, if this is Marty's last film, I think this would be a great one to go out on, just on how he makes his presence known in it. But the performances all around are great. Like I mentioned, like, Robert De Niro has one of the best of his recent career here. Lily Gladstone is definitely the best performance, even though she does not have as much screen time as Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro, which is a bit sad. I wish there were a few more scenes with her, but the scenes that she does occupy, they're great. Every moment, like, you watch her transform from an assertive woman to a distrustful woman who's ailing, and her health shifts dramatically over the course of this marriage. In terms of the way that the film is framed, I mean, it's a Martin Scorsese film. Obviously, it's going to look gorgeous, and it's going to be tightly edited, as they always are. And there's a lot of beautiful scenes. Like, there's great large shots of, like, the vistas here of, these different ranches and the town. I love how he brings together, like, all the details of, like, this small town 1920s America by having, like, roadsters, occasionally have races through town, and old people sit back and just kind of watch the races and wonder what happened, to their old ways of the 19th century. And then just, like, little details here and there about how, like, they set up the pool hall, and how there's, the barber shop, and these the aspects of, like, the clothing, and how everything is set up in this community where you get to realize, what's at stake here. Like, how much Willie owns, and how much of a reach he has in this community, to better orchestrate everything. Because we do follow a handful of characters who get picked off, and others who just become involved in Willie's schemes. Like, it seems like that's the only career path here in town here. It's either you're a victim of Willie's schemes, or you're part of them. And if you double cross him while performing, like, an assassination, he'll find just the right way to knock you off. Like, he'll find the perfect way by saying, hey, fine, you did an okay job, I guess. Hey, by the way, if you want some easy money, you could rip off this bank at this time, in which there will definitely not be cops there shooting you up. Which he kind of says not so subtly, but yeah, like, you get, like, all the wonderful details of this, of the Osage County and the tribes, and how they feel about these murders that are happening. It would have been nice, I think, the film runs about 3.5 hours long, so we do get to spend quite a bit of time with these characters. I would have liked to have seen a few more scenes with the tribe. We do get a few that are very impactful, that work very well. But I wish we had a little bit more of that perspective. And here's where it's kind of difficult to, like, weigh the film in this regard, because on one level, I would like to see, more scenes of the tribe to better get to understand the community and learn more about it and see it, represented up on screen. At the same time, it's a film made by Martin Scorsese, and the areas that he knows best to evoke here is going to be like the story of Ernest and Willie and how they deceive this community and focusing on them for their criminal story of how they let these murders keep going on all for the sake of greed, which is, perfectly within what Scorsese knows how to do best. And it works out well here as well. It just, it's the type of film that you expect Martin Scorsese to do well. And he does it again, he makes this material work. So it's framed well. I love the cast. I love the way it's performed. I think in terms of it's debatable about, how long it should be. I didn't really feel like it was that long, mostly just because it's a tightly edited film. It's by, Scorsese's longtime editor, Thelma Shoemaker, who always does a fantastic job by giving you the brisk details and jumping around while still giving you enough of an idea of the era and the people that we're focusing on, and giving you the details that are worth highlighting with the particular story here. So even at 3.5 hours, it breezed by just because it's perfectly paced. I guess a few, it does feel like at sometimes that some of the actors here are a little bit underutilized, and I say that mostly just because there's some smaller actors here who really go out of their way to really make themselves known and have a bigger presence than the other bigger names who just step in here. Like Jesse Plemons steps in for a handful of scenes. John Lithgow's in there for a tiny bit. Brendan Fraser's maybe for 2 or 3 scenes. And he's trying, but it feels like he's he wants to make himself known. When Brendan Fraser shows up, his first scene, he just explodes. You are not going to miss him. If you're worried that he's going to be lost in the background, or you're going to blink and you'll miss him, you won't. He stands out the most here. But yeah, just, all the performances are great here. It's shot beautifully and it's tightly paced. I say that it's 3.5 hours, but it's tightly paced. It's well edited. And I feel like it doesn't get lost, in just staging, the murders to actually say something meaningful about the violence that unfolded within this story. And I love the way how the violence is highlighted at just the right moments. Early on in the film, a lot of the murders are off screen, for the initial ones that are mentioned. And then you get to that one scene where a mother is just shot in broad daylight right in front of her baby, and the baby is taken away. And it just hits you hard at that point. After watching a handful of murders that were just off screen, just said no investigation, and then just pow right there, it lets you know the stakes here. And then just having moments where it gets even more grisly. At one point there's an autopsy in which bone is cut open, and later on there's a house explosion in which basically a chunk of someone's head comes off. And it's brutal violence, but it doesn't feel like overkill. It feels like it's placed just at the right moment where you're supposed to be disgusted, where you're supposed to look at how horrifying this is, and it hits you at just the right moments. So yeah, it's a very, very tough watch. It's probably one of Scorsese's tougher films to get through. I think the last time I ever got this deeply involved and a wee bit uncomfortable with a Scorsese film was with Silence, from 2016, about the missionaries who came over to Japan, which is just such a grueling film to get through. It was brutal. It was dark. And it made me think a lot more about, the internal conflicts of these characters coming to terms with faith. In that same degree, Killers of the Flower Moon made me, think a lot deeply about, how easy it was for people like these, like Ernest and Willie, to just rip people off and get away with it with only the most mild of catharsis for how it unfolded. Like Ernest, like he's one of those characters who you hope that he'll come forward, you hope that he'll do the right thing, but you want to see him fall and be punished for it. And you know that no matter, even when you get to that final moment where it's just like, yes, you realize this guy's despicable, that even people with like the lowest of media literacy skills would be able to see perfectly that he is the bad guy here. He will still not suffer as much as everyone else has suffered here. And like the epilogue mentions as much as well, which I again, another one of Scorsese's lovely touches here. I love how the epilogue is staged, which in addition to making you think about the events of the film, it makes you think about how those events will be perceived in the future. Whether we will be, whether we'll look back on these murders as, something that needs to be taken seriously, or if it'll just be treated as, like another like true crime podcast or something like that. You'll just listen to the background in for a little bit and then not really think about again. So the fact that, again, I want to bring that back up again to how Scorsese bookends the film with the Osage tribes, culture being highlighted in those final moments and beginning moments. There's a firm focus on what is being lost here and how just the nature of greed in that time of America just drives people to do the most hideous things, and how it can keep us doing that horrible stuff, just destroying land and people, all in the name of owning it all. So in that regard, what can I say? It's a Martin Scorsese film, even for being a historical drama that is not that isn't usually the type of film that he always, like, he has done historical dramas here and there, but for a historical crime drama like this, it has so many of his best features, including one aspect that I want to mention here, which maybe a little thing that I've noticed in Scorsese's films, but usually when he highlights crime films like this, he tends to have moments where he showcases the children present. I've noticed this and stuff with like in Goodfellas, there's a scene where like the children are watching from like the stairs at their parents just implode, and watching them like disintegrate into hideous human beings. A similar thing happens in The Wolf of Wall Street, where a child watches on as Jordan just goes nuts and doesn't become a human being anymore. That same level of observation is present here as well. Which I think is a great touch, because it lets you know about, the innocence that's being corrupted with how life progresses, and how it's easy to forget that, these families, these families had children that witnessed all this, and that they watch us, that they see our flaws, and they take it in as well. So in that regard, yeah, it's pretty much everything that I wanted to see out of a Martin Scorsese film, and yeah, it was an amazing experience. I absolutely loved sitting through this film.